Good morning. Welcome to the Humanist Communities in Silicon Valley Sunday Forum. I'm Alex Havasi. I'm a member of the Humanist Community. The Humanist Community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association, and humanism is a secular and reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our responsibility and ability to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, fairness, happiness, and compassion in using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. A special welcome to those who are with us for the first time. You can check your weekly forums and other events on our website. You can also help us to continue to present these forums by donating to the Humanist Community at our website, which is www.humanist.org. Many non-religious people struggle to understand what should be considered the source of morality. These are upstanding moral people who understand what it means to be good and kind, but are not sure where morals come from. Today's speaker, Keith Swenson, takes the point of view that morals are real and they are neither from God nor are they random. Moral behavior is as it is because of the form of human interaction with each other and with the world. Humans have learned how to become moral through a self-reinforcing natural process that can be readily seen in the world once we know how to look for it. Moral guidelines are not an accident, nor are they arbitrary commands. Instead, we say that we've discovered the best way to live because it is the best way to live. Keith is a local resident of the Silicon Valley area and a longtime member of the Bay Area Humanists and the Humanist Community. After a career in software engineering, he focused mainly on philosophical topics and interests. He has a degree in physics and computer science from the University of California. In his spare time, he likes to hike in the wilderness and plays in a classic rock band. Keith?
There you go. All right, thanks, everybody. This talk is the result of Alex coming to me, I guess maybe 15 months ago saying, Keith, do you have anything you want to talk about? And I said, yes, I'm working on a talk about moral realism. And all year long, it was like every month, Tom knows, because every month, I almost got this done. Anyway, so I'm really happy. It's been a bit of a road to get here. So are you able to put the slides and share them? And I'll follow along. Hopefully we can share a link to the slides. I will do that at the end. Also, a lot of this has been written down. I am trying to produce a very small book on the topic so that you can read this at home in your spare time. There we go. Can everybody see the slides? Okay, I'll be speaking to them. So, all right, good. All right, an objective basis for morality in the real world. Okay, so let's go to the first slide is a table of contents. And I'm not going to go through that in detail, but go to the next slide. Let's start with a few definitions. So go to the first definition slide. So there is a little bit of an objective that I have here, a sort of a goal. And that is that when I talk to a lot of my non-religious friends, the religious guys are saying objective morality because God commanded it. And a lot of the non-religious ones are coming back saying, well, I don't believe that. Morals must be subjective. And what I want to talk about here is that a subjective set of morals doesn't really make sense. I'll go through the whole reasoning behind that. But just to be clear that we know what we're talking about, objective morality is the philosophical belief that moral principles and values are universally true. That is, there's something true about saying that this act is good, and it's not just an opinion. It's independent of opinions, cultural norms, or personal feelings. So that is objective morality, also known as moral realism and moral objectivism. Subjective morality, on the other hand, is the philosophical belief that moral truths are not universally absolute, but are dependent upon the attitudes, the feelings, the opinions, or conventions of individuals in the group. Okay, so those are the two things. I want to contrast those two and hopefully convince you one way or the other. Let's go to the next slide. What is good? What makes a good action good? Okay, what makes a bad action bad? I will be using the terms bad and evil and wrong interchangeably. It's just something you shouldn't do, something you ought not do. Those are all the same, putting them all in a category. The good, the right, these, of course, are things that are virtuous, benevolent, beneficial. I'm going to be using good and right interchangeably. So, we're not talking about something that tastes good. It's not necessarily feels good. It not necessarily is good for me. Those are different meanings of good. We're talking about morally good. Let's go to the next slide. There's also a discussion of morals and ethics. Okay, what's the difference between those? Again, I'm pretty much going to blend those together. Morals specifically are very often specific rules that you follow. Ethics are kind of group-oriented, culturally accepted right means of behavior. I'm not drawing a distinction between them. So if I say ethics at one moment and I say morals at another moment, I really am just talking about what you should do and what you shouldn't do and how you decide that. I'll also be talking about rules, and rules are a simplified description of a behavior that should be done. And the key there is it's simplified and it's concrete. And I'm going to talk about the problems with that in a moment. The next slide talks about action. Okay, action is something that you do in the world. Agent is a person that does that and makes the decision to take that action. The context is everything around where the action happens. And that could be very large, could be very small, could be very large, depends on the action that's being taken. And then when I talk about tribes, all of this morality is about working together, getting along together and accomplishing things together. That group that you're trying to do things could be, a club, an organization. It could be your family. It could be your community. It could be your school. It could be your nation. All of these different groups of people are trying to work together. I'm going to use the term tribe just to mean that. Okay. When I say tribe, I don't literally mean it's necessarily tribe. It could be your neighborhood, whatever it is. But if you're trying to get along together and I say tribe, I'm going to refer in that way. The next slide is, I'd also like to hold in your mind 4 different concepts around morality. And these, I think the difference between these is the source of a lot of the disagreement when we talk about morals and morality. So starting at the bottom, it's the performed behavior. Okay, it's what you actually do. Okay, and above that, your personal code of conduct. This is what you believe that you do. This is what you tell people that you do. So maybe you say, I always drive the speed limit. Maybe sometimes you don't always drive the speed limit. Okay, whatever it is. So there's what you do, there's what you intend to do. And then above that, there's cultural values, laws, and ethics. This is our shared understanding among, us and the people that are around us. We stop at red lights. That's a shared understanding of what we should do and shouldn't do. And those are often very closely related. But I think we all know of cases where there's a law that you think is not really right. It's a wrong law. So my behavior might be just a little bit different than that in some cases. And then finally, there's this idea of the moral optimum. And this is these are going to be the objective absolute morals. So this basically, these are our approximates to this is what you really should do. This is what really matters and what's really going to make a difference. And we get as close as we can to that. And I'll talk about how that exists and where it comes from and such. Okay. Next, the first topic, what is good and what is bad? Next section. It's really important when we talk about morals that we talk about, what is it that we're judging? We're talking about good actions and bad actions. And what I want to say is that what matters is an action, something that you do. It's a movement in the universe. Now, keep in mind, the universe is one big swirling mess. Okay, it's all connected. Everything is interacting with everything. Out of that mess, we need to identify things that we call actions. Okay, you were driving drunk. Okay, so that's like we've categorized that, and you need to understand that driving drunk is a way we've carved that action out of reality so that we can talk about it. So we're going to talk about actions. It's a movement that affects the world that some agent decided to do. So if you're just thinking and imagining things and you didn't actually affect the world, it's not an action. Okay. And I know that sometimes thinking about doing something wrong might, thinking about murder might lead you to murder, but until you actually do it, we can't judge the action. So we're talking about things that people do. And the main reason I'm bringing this up is that a lot of moral discussions on YouTube and elsewhere talks about propositions being true or false. Okay. It is true that you should help a little old lady across the street. That's a statement that's true. I want to think instead of in terms of the actions. It's the act of actually helping the lady across the street that we can then judge, because we have to consider the street and we have to consider the time and we have to consider all sorts of things around it. All right, so and a snowstorm's not an action because nobody decided. So these are things that we decide to do and they have an effect on the world. Okay, but what makes them good? Aristotle and Plato, I believe both of them, moral virtue is necessary for achieving eudaimonia, okay? The ultimate human good, flourishing, living well, the good life. Okay, so moral and ethical behavior leads us to a good life. But what do we really mean by good life? What makes a particular action good and another bad? Is it good just because I like it? I mean, I just happen to like candy and somebody gives me candy, so that's good. What is it that makes it good? And also, there's a very curious thing that the same action can sometimes be considered good and sometimes be considered bad. The exact same thing. For example, if you had a bunch of people suffering from hypothermia and you're in a cabin and there's a fireplace, lighting a fire would probably be a very good thing to help rescue those people. But if you're in a crowded airplane that's up in the air flying, lighting a fire is probably a very bad thing to do. It's exactly the same behavior, but we need to consider the context. So next slide, consequences are what matter. So eudaimonia, okay, a good action brings about flourishing or living well or good life. And it may not, one action isn't going to like do all of that, but does it contribute to getting to there, or does it detract from getting there? This is known as consequentialism. So we're basically judging an action based on the effect that it has. Here's the only difficulty. How do we decide whether the consequence is good or bad? I mean, I mentioned lighting a fire, good in one case because we have people that are freezing and need to be warmed up. Bad in another case because all sorts of reasons. Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill expanded this into something called utilitarianism. And here they say that we judge the consequence of an action based on the total amount of pleasure that it increases pleasure in the population, or it decreases pain. So it's all based on this idea that pleasure is good, pain is bad, and then we can judge actions based on how much pleasure and pain it gives to the population. This is also known as hedonism. And I'm going to disagree with them, politely disagree, I hope. I'm going to say it's not just about pleasure and pain, but it's something more fundamental to that. And there's nothing more fundamental to life than the goal to go on living. And this is one of these philosophical things where you say something absolutely trivial and we need to recognize it as being very, very profound. Yes, living things have an implicit goal to go on living. But I'm going to say that that's how we're going to judge these actions, and that also that works sort of the way that evolution works, in that the things that actually allowed you to survive are good because they help you to survive, but they're also the ones that we have because they were the ones that the surviving tribes went to. I'll go into this in a moment. Consider, for example, murder. So I'm going to use a couple of really extreme examples because it's easier to see if we talk about extreme examples, but I hope you'll see that it applies to a whole bunch of other things. So the next one, in the case of murder, let's imagine two identical tribes, okay? They are the same. They have the same climate. They have the same number of people. They're exactly the same, except for in one of them, arbitrary killing of tribe members is okay. Murder is just legal. It's just legal. It's just okay. They just are fine with it. Tribe 2, on the other hand, is normal. Okay, arbitrary killing of tribe members is not okay. Murder is illegal. Now, the question that I put to you, which of these tribes is going to survive longer? I mean, it should be pretty easy to see that the tribe that thinks that murder is legal, it's good, murder is good, that tribe is going to die out very quickly because people are going to be murdered, among other things. But also, you're going to waste a lot of time making a fortress that you can sleep in, and and protecting yourself at all points in time so that nobody murders you. That's going to detract from the ability of this group to actually get along and survive. And so, I mean, I hope you would see. Of course, this is a hypothetical; would never happen because we all innately know that murder is not good. But if someone was to think that it was good, that tribe, those group of people would die very quickly. I mean, they would not survive. Let's go to the next one. A little easier to understand this example. Theft. Same scenario. Tribe one, stealing property of other tribe members is okay. There's no property rights. Theft is legal. Just take whatever you want, whatever. Tribe two is, again, normal. Stealing of properties is not okay. Theft is illegal. Now, again, I would ask you, which tribe is going to survive? You're out in the wilderness. You have to work together. And by the way, I should mention that humans don't live on their own in the wilderness. Okay, it never happens. There's a couple of famous examples of someone who managed to survive for a few years in the wilderness alone. It basically never happens. We are adapted to live together and to work together. That's our superpower, is that we have the social ability and the language ability to coordinate our activities so that we can actually survive and outcompete the other animals. So you have to live together. But if you didn't have this idea, this concept that property, that property that once you own, you can keep it, nobody's going to invest in making property. You're not going to invest in making a bow and arrow if somebody can just take it from you. And by the way, that's okay. You can't even complain about it, right? That's going to be an okay thing. You just go steal somebody else's, right? I mean, just take somebody else's. Nobody would actually be investing. You wouldn't build a nice house because somebody could take it from you. I mean, there's all sorts of problems if you don't recognize that people should have some sort of property rights. And again, I think this is innate. I think this comes from before before humans were speaking to each other. I think this idea of property was there. But in order to get along and in order to work together and in order to survive, we have to have this concept of theft, of property rights, and that theft is illegal. And so then the next slide, this is just a sort of a survey of a number of other morals. What about lying? Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about lying because lying there are white lies, okay, and I'll sort of go into that. But in general, misleading your tribe members could be very bad, and so there needs to be some sort of idea that we're going to share good information. What about marriage, the institution of marriage, or the opposite side of it, adultery, particularly underage girls, incest, these kinds of things? Some of them are taboos. Clearly, a tribe that institutes marriage is going to survive better than a tribe that doesn't, right? Because a number of different reasons. The concept of marriage, okay, whether it's one partner or multiple partners, whatever it is in polygamy and all that, that does give a place for children to grow, and it's going to help that group survive. Whereas if you didn't have that, probably wouldn't do as well. Keeping promises, honoring commitments, trustworthiness is something that helps us all get along together. Cheating and unfairness, another important thing that helps us get along. Care for young and the vulnerable. Okay, keeping tribal members alive is important. So what I'm going to claim is that every moral you've ever heard, every guideline for what you should do, is something that on the average helps you get along with everyone, and that helps you all to survive in the long run. And that there has been this experiment for 100,000 years where different tribes have tried out different moral landscapes, different moral ideas, and the ones that have won are the ones that we have today. And that's where they come from, basically. Okay, so as Austin Powers says, it's just behave. Okay, we're talking about behaviors. Humans must live in groups. We do speak a language, so we can talk about these things. So we can talk about rules and morality and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, morality is the behavior that assures best we can live together. Well, you probably think that's way too simple. Let's go to the next one. You're probably aware that David Hume said you can't derive what you ought to do from the consequences of an action. He says you can't get from is to ought. And he looked carefully at the consequences and came to this conclusion. G.E. Moore also says, this is he called it the naturalistic fallacy. Okay. All right, so these guys are pretty famous out there, but I would say that you can get from is to ought. And I can defend this at length if you want. I'm not going to spend much time on it today. If you are playing the game of chess, okay, chess, if you're playing the game, you're playing to win because you're not trying to win. You're not playing chess. If you're playing the game, we can look at certain moves and we can say, this is a move you ought to do because it's more likely to bring about the winning of the game. We can say, this is a move you ought not to do, okay? Giving your queen up and not getting anything back in return would be something you should not do, you ought not do. So if you know the game, you know the goal of the game, we can then evaluate different actions, the consequences of those actions, and see if they take you closer to the winning condition of the game. So all we really need to do is we need to understand what the game is that we're all playing. Next slide. What is that game? Well, I've already told you. It's survival. And that may seem on the surface very simplistic, but hang out with me. Hang with me on this. We are playing a survival game. We are playing, and it's not just bare survival, but it's flourishing. It's about well-being. We are playing the game of trying to get all of us in our tribe to always be in a state of well-being. That is what we're trying to do. And then we can look at an action and we can look at the consequence of that action and say, does that bring us on the average over everybody into a state of well-being or closer to a state of well-being, or does it detract away from it? And so goodness is those activities that increase well-being are good by definition. And you may think this is simplistic. Oh, there's got to be more to it, but what makes it really good? What if, for instance, it would be better if this tribe died out? I mean, what if killing all humans would make the world better? I get those questions all the time too. And I just want to just set them aside and say, we can ask curious questions, but at the end, it really is just about living together and working together and getting along. So that's the game we're playing. All right. But the next topic, rules are inadequate. We talk about morals in very simplistic terms. Okay. So first of all, actions, next one. Actions are, I mentioned the swirl of the universe. And based on conventions, based on our understanding of the world, okay, our worldview, we're going to break everything that happens up into discrete actions. And we're going to talk about those actions. The problem is every action is caused by hundreds of previous actions. And every action affects hundreds of other things that happen in the future. So there's this really complex and interacting mess of interactions that are happening. And it's really hard to break out what really was the action here and what really caused it and what effect it had. For example, stealing food. Okay, generally stealing would be bad, but if you had a starving child and you're stealing food to, maybe stealing food would be okay in that case. Or maybe you're tearing something down, tearing a building down. Sounds kind of bad, but if you're going to build a new building there, you got to tear it down first. So then it's good. So one needs to sort of figure out how these things all relate. But the main thing is that goodness depends on context. Okay, we're going to talk about actions as this, description, like don't lie, don't steal. But we need to also consider where you're doing that action. I mentioned the fire earlier. That's one example. This one, is it good or bad to slice meat? Okay, slicing meat. Well, if it's done by a cook preparing a meal, probably a good thing to do. Okay, if it's done by a thug that is slicing into an innocent bystander, that's probably a bad thing. However, a surgeon slicing into a person to remove a ruptured appendix, probably a good thing. Okay, so slicing meat, we can talk about that action of slicing meat, but we need to also include the full context to it. The next slide. Don't break windows, right? Breaking windows is bad. We all know that. I mean, windows are there. You don't want to break them. But next slide. But okay, if you're breaking the window to rescue somebody or something, these of course are AI generated graphics. I tried to put a baby in there and it wouldn't draw it. It said, oh, I can't put a baby that's in an endangered situation. And the other thing is, why are the flames coming out of the back? Okay, never mind. Don't read too much into it. But there can be situations where breaking the window is what you should do. Okay, so just another example of how context is important. So the next slide, we're coming back to these four things. These arrows did not get drawn right, but I think you can see where they're going. Here's what we want. We want nice, simple rules, okay? Don't steal, don't lie, don't speed on the freeway. You want these simple things. And so we often incorporate these sort of simple, easy rules into our personal code of conduct. And we also make such things illegal, legal and illegal. And as you probably know, laws are not really short. Sometimes they're kind of long. But even so, all of that needs to be taken with a grain of salt. We have these simplistic things that we talk about here. Don't break windows. But we understand that you're supposed to apply some common sense. If you need to break the window to do the fire alarm thing, then yes, you are supposed to break the window. Okay, so there's common sense, and there are exceptions to the simplistic statement of the rules. Now, up here we have a moral optimum. That is, we have the sort of the reality that an action will happen. Can you go to the next slide? This actually, I just restructured the slide and I forgot to delete the old one. But there's a whole web of exceptions to the sort of simply. So you want to kind of make it up. The next slide, that the under the real morality, what is good and bad, is a rule surrounded by a bunch of exceptions that are, that then bring on a different condition. Okay, there's this really sort of complex mess, which is don't break windows, except if you need to do so to turn on the fire alarm, or except if you need to rescue somebody, or, and there can be a whole bunch of exceptions. So this is kind of real morality. This is kind of what you really should and shouldn't do. However, we always describe these in terms of very simple rules, and we don't flesh it out. So I want to understand that difference between what really is a good thing to do and what we talk about as rules. Okay, so let's dive then into subjective morality. Next slide, and the one after that. Jump right in. Okay, so you all know that objective is something that could be measured, and we all would agree on it. We can measure the height of the tree to various precisions, but we can, at the end of the day, we can sit down with a measuring stick and we could agree. On the other hand, which flavor of ice cream tastes better? What I think tastes better may be very different than what you think tastes better, and there's no right or wrong about that. I mean, my like is my like. So subjective is my opinion, my feeling about it, and it may be different from yours. Next one. I just brought back the definitions again, same definitions I gave earlier, but I just wanted to point out that with subjective, my opinion is just as good as your opinion. Something's good if I think it is good. And the claim is that there is no other reality to what makes something good. So for example, I don't like murder. I think murder is bad. You think murder is bad, but maybe there's someone that thinks murder is good. And if it is, then it's just good. It's just whatever you think. And hopefully we come up with an agreement on this. So on the next slide, the moral subjectivist is basically saying this doesn't exist. There is no overall guideline that says that an action is good or bad. There's no way to do that. All we have is we have personal code of conduct. We have our own feelings about what is good. And then we come and we get together and we make agreements. Okay, we're all not going to steal. Okay, nobody steal. That's good. It's sort of like speed limits. We can just decide on the speed limit, and then good is if you're under the speed limit, bad is if you're over it. There is a little bit of this in the world. For example, in America, we drive on the right side of the road. So driving on the right is good. Okay, go to England, drive on the right side of the road is bad. Okay, and that's a sort of an arbitrary difference. Okay, it is true that there are arbitrary differences like that. And when we look at our moral optimum up at the top, it needs to consider that, right side of the street is good in America, but in England, the left side of the street is good, right? I mean, that sort of exception and condition needs to be in that rule of where you should be driving. But the subjectivist says there's nothing here. It's just agreement, as far as I know. So let's take this next slide, this little sort of thought experiment. And I know this is really weird, so you'll have to forgive me. Imagine a culture where everybody got together and decided it would be a good thing if everybody cut off their right hand. Okay, I know this is crazy, and it's done surgically. It's done very nice. There's no pain. There's no suffering. And when you're done, it's sealed up nicely. There's no gangrene or anything. So you're happy about it. And these guys, for some reason, have this weird idea that it would be good to chop off everybody's right hand. Okay? I'm seeing some funny faces. Let me ask the question, but is this law good? Is it a good law or is it a bad law? And I would put to you that it is a bad law, because with one hand, you're going to have a hard time getting things done. I mean, we just know that. You're not going to be effective. Is that going to kill everybody? No, it's not going to kill everybody in the tribe. But if you had two tribes, a two-handed tribe and a one-handed tribe, the two-handed tribe is going to do much, much better than them. They're going to outcompete. I imagine they went to war, right? I can have a real problem there. I think we can objectively say that this law is a bad law. And my opinion of it makes no difference whatsoever. I mean, obviously, I don't want right hands cut off, but my opinion of this doesn't matter. The fact is that a culture of people with one hand would simply not do as well as a culture of people with two hands. Okay. Hopefully that's the feeling of objective morality that I want to bring out here. Okay, so what? Next slide. We get together. We decide how we want our society to be. We know what we want. I don't want murder. Okay. I don't want theft. Great. We'll make that all illegal. I don't like speeders. Make that illegal. The problem is that our actions actually have consequences which have measurable effects, and that can be positive or negative on our ability to thrive, on our well-being. And you can't ignore that. You simply can't say that the law in the previous slide was good. I mean, I argue back if anybody thinks it's good, but I think we all agree that that would be a really bad law, and for very objective reasons. It's not just an opinion. Okay. Well, if you're going to do subjective, next slide. If you're going to do the next moral subjectivism, we also need to talk a little bit about moral relativism, and this is the one that takes it one step further. Next slide, please. This is the idea that morals aren't just what I think they are. I mean, something isn't just good because I think it's good, but that it could be good for one person and the same thing could be bad for someone else. And I don't just mean that they think it's good or that they prefer it. We're talking about morality, which is that it really is good, and moral relativism sort of goes there. There is a sort of an analogy to this, which is the language analogy. In Berlin, if you were to ask somebody the way to the train station, it would be right to say it in German. In Paris, it would be right to say it in French. Okay, so there are differences around the world, but still, the problem that the moral relativist has, on the next slide, is that what a culture decides to do and whether it's good for them is simply not just a preference. Like I say, with the chopping off the right hand, even if everybody wanted that, it would still be bad for them. But by the definition of moral relativism, you can't even talk about what's good and bad. I can't even say that would be a bad thing, because someone will come back and say, yeah, but their culture is to chop off the right hand. And so therefore it is good because that's their culture. So I'm going to reject both subjectivism and relativism. And I'm going to say, no, there are consequences of actions, and those consequences have effects, and those effects either help us to get along or they detract from getting along. All right. So, but then there's this idea of, okay, that's great. There is a definition of the right way to behave. Yay. Where'd it come from? Who invented that? Did somebody just invent that? Was it there at the Big Bang? Was this definition of don't steal, was that something that existed in the Big? How do these objective truths come about. All right. So I have an analogy that I think will help you understand it. And this is the shipbuilding analogy. Okay. And this little boat is called a coracle. It's a very simple one. You got sticks covered by hide. These are the first boats that people made as long as 100,000 years ago. It's hard to believe. People sailed from Libya to Crete, which is a 200-mile journey on little boats like this. All right. 100,000 years ago. But who says what a boat design is good? Is this a good boat design or not? I can easily imagine 100,000 years ago, a bunch of men getting together, and I don't mean to be sexist, but it probably was men, who went out there and said, hey, whose boat can go fastest? Let's have a race, right? So they're out there, they're all paddling along, and one person wins the race, and he gets the extra onion after dinner. So go forward a couple dozen thousand years, and you have the America's Cup boats, arguably the fastest wind-driven boats in the world that have ever been invented in all of history. Look at the design. We're now, they all have two hulls at this point. We're into catamarans. They've shown that those go faster than the monohull, and the sails are very tall and thin instead of short and fat, right? I mean, they've shown all of these things over years of experimentation. We've come up with better and better designs of boats. Okay, but who is it that says this is the best design? Who is it that says that's a good design? Who invented that goodness of that design? And I would say it simply comes out of the physicality of the water, the challenge that you're trying to win a race. Okay, and that ends up defining the best boat that can win that race. Now, do we know that this is the best design? Maybe there's another design. Maybe a triple hull would do better, or maybe something really bizarre. Who knows? We don't know that this is the best design, but we know this is the best we've come up with. So the optimum is that ideal above. That's the absolute fastest boat that anybody could ever invent or design. And that optimum was not invented by anybody. It simply exists. It simply comes out of the properties of how strong gravity is here, how strong the wind blows, all that kind of stuff. So it exists, and as humans, we attempt to approximate that. We attempt to find that optimum boat design as best we can by running races. Now, by the way, this is not the best boat design for everything. Okay, so if you were trying to ship oil from one continent to another continent, obviously this isn't going to do too much good. Or if you need to get thousands of people across the ocean, this isn't the way to do it. So it's always an optimum for a particular purpose. And as long as we understand that purpose, these optimum behaviors can exist. Let's take a look at the next slide. This is a little bit different. And I'm talking about wolf morality. So dogs are also social animals. They hunt in a pack. They have rules that they behave. They have property rules. Like if one dog, that's his thing, the other dogs won't take it, right? I mean, they understand these rules. More importantly, if they are sneaking up on prey, they all understand that they shouldn't be barking at that point. They need to understand these behaviors so that they can work together and get along. Again, where do those behaviors come from? Well, the optimum behavior for a wolf is defined by the shape of the wolf, the shape of the prey, the landscape you find yourselves in. There is an optimum behavior. And over millions of years, these animals have learned to get better and better. You all know how evolution works. It's all kind of random, but the winner always does better. And as long as those traits are inherited to the next generation, those will continue to spread. And I think that morality in humans spreads two ways. Some of it is actually instinct. Okay, I think things like murder and things that physically feel bad when you contemplate doing them or doing them. Those are probably built into our genes, but there are also we share verbally our rules and our cultural guidelines and those kind of things. So they're passed on from parent to child. They learn these things. So there's two different ways that that's heralded, but nevertheless, there's the same kind of evolutionary effect on picking out the morals picking out the behaviors that are best for surviving. So on the next slide, I compare biological evolution with moral evolution. And, yeah, so new animal forms succeed if you live. Well, new morals succeed if the people using those morals live. Inferior forms die out, inferior morals die out. So there's a pretty good parallel here, and you're probably familiar with the selfish gene theory, which is the idea that the only reason we exist is to pass on genes. It's actually the genes are the ones that are the true thing that's happening in the world, and we're just helping those genes, propagate forward. So there's an idea. Next slide. Selfish moral theory. I'm not going to spend any time on this, but that the morals are really the thing that's running cultures, and the morals just want to survive, and we're just the agent that spreads the moral values. All right, so that's just kind of a fun thing to think about. It's not that important. Let's talk a bit about biblical morality. So you're all probably aware, next slide, that most of the theists are taking the point of view that these morals exist because God commanded them to exist. He commands us to be good. He commands us to follow these behaviors. And lo and behold, you know what? They work. If you don't steal stuff, you get along better. You don't murder your neighbor. Good idea. Primitive cultures knew that they had these rules they had to live by, and they knew that they had to instruct the other members of their team. Don't do that. Do this. It's good to do this. It's bad to do that. But you can easily imagine that they had no idea where they came from. How did we get here with these laws that everybody knows we need to follow? So it seems like a reasonable thing to say, well, a long time ago there was a God, and he just commanded it to be there, and that's what we do. And that's kind of an easy answer that they went by. However, on the next slide, if we think about the optimum boat design, it's kind of silly to think that this is the optimum boat design because God commanded it. Okay, he just said you will have a catamaran and you will have a tall sail. It's not commanded. I mean, it's the best design because it's the best design. It's the best design because it wins the races. And I think that morals is the same thing. It's the best behavior. They're good actions because those are the ones that help everybody get along and survive. And those have been selected. They get selected that way, and they survive. The morals survive that way. Bad morals fail in the long run. Okay, this brings me all the way around to my main topic here, which is subjective morality, objective morality. So with objective morality, next slide, we're going to say that when you act on the world, when you take an action, there is going to be a result. Behaviors matter. Some of these actions are going to be good for your tribe. Some of these actions are going to be bad for your tribe. So we're going to try to select for the actions that are good for your tribe. And that's morally good. That's what we mean by morally good. And that there is an optimum behavior. There is it's kind of a perfect way to behave in any action. We may or may not find it. This is the problem with this. We don't actually have access to this directly. We live down here. We can decide rules for our own behavior. We can say, I'm not going to eat donuts anymore. Okay, those are bad for me. I'm not doing it. Right? Or we can set laws on how we behave together, intellectual property rights, things like that. That's where we live, and those actions may or may not be good. We always, we have an opinion that they're good. We try, just like the boats. We try to make a boat that goes fast, but at the end of the day, the race is what determines it. And this is the race. This is the thing that's deciding actually what becomes good and bad in the end. The next slide, it's a simple summary of this. I don't know if this slide. Morality of an action is the ultimate effect on the universe within the context of the universe. Okay, so let's go 2 slides. This was just saying, hey, they exist, but we don't know what they are. The next slide. So the problem is we don't know what the correct behavior, exactly correct for all situations, right? Because there's all those exceptions and there's all that stuff. We can say speeding is bad. Okay, you shouldn't speed. Don't speed. But if it's a medical emergency, you got to get to the hospital quickly. There's a well-known exception that it would be okay maybe to drive a little bit faster to get there. We don't know this, but what we can do is we can play with these. We can experiment, and that's what is going on with all of this stuff that's going on. We are experimenting with different laws and different cultural conventions, and we're also running this experiment with hundreds of different dimensions of morality. Okay, there's driving speed, and there's should you take vaccines, and all of these different dimensions. We're experimenting with all of them at the same time. So unfortunately, our culture doesn't select right away. Yeah, that's the winner, that's a loser, right? It's really hard to figure it out. And so there's this sort of, it takes generations to sort of determine whether any particular action is good or bad. But have faith, have faith. Ultimately, it will. The cultures that do hit upon the right things to live by will be the ones that do survive and carry on those moral values with them. And that this process of elimination does, in fact, end up producing over time the moral values that we all live by. On the next slide, I just thought it's worth mentioning this whole idea of we do it for love. Love is this power that we have as humans to go beyond what is strictly necessary, go beyond what is transactional, but to do things for our tribe members, for our family, for our friends, that go beyond what you could ever hope to get in return. Well, if you look at that, a lot of morals are kind of like that. Okay, don't steal the candy. Okay, or you can't afford the TV. Don't steal the TV. Wait until you've built up the money and then go buy the TV. So you have to often put off short-term, things that you would like to behave in a moral way. And again, we do that because we care about the people that we live with, and we want us all to do better. So we want everyone to have a good well-being and to not do it selfishly. And we recognize that, and that's why we follow these rules. Okay. So 2 slides forward, we're back to our definitions of objectivity, and one more slide. So again, let's reflect on these definitions. Moral realism is the philosophical belief that moral principles and values are universally true. There are values that will be true, and they exist independently of human opinions, cultural norms, and personal feelings. Just like that optimum boat design doesn't depend on anybody's opinion. That boat design exists, and it is a optimum that you can work towards. And your opinion of what should be the fastest boat doesn't matter. There is, in fact, a reality to correct behavior. Subjective morality, again, is the philosophical belief that moral truths are not universal or absolute, but are dependent upon the attitudes, feelings, and opinions and conventions of individuals and groups. And I would say, again, the boat analogy, the boat design analogy, doesn't matter what your opinion of the boat is. It doesn't matter. There is a reality. And the same thing's true with things like murder and theft and chopping off your right hand. There is a reality to how those behaviors affect all of us and your tribe. And at the end of the day, it all comes back to simply surviving. It's helping each other get along and survive. Okay, so my next slide is the summary. Hopefully I've covered all of these things. Morality is about the effect of actions, all right? The things that we do, things that affect the world, and that we decide to do, right? Because in every moral discussion, we're talking about a person making a decision of, do I do this action or that? Good actions are good because they help the tribe succeed, and ultimately they help everybody survive to a small degree. Subjective morality can't work because it's just opinions. I mean, we may have good opinions and we may have good intuition about that, and that's partially been baked into our genes and partially baked into our culture, but those opinions just happen to come close to reality. Okay, it's a good place to start, but ultimately there is a reality. Ultimately, moral truths are real. They're hard to know, The optimum will be very complex. It'll have lots of exceptions and special cases. What is moral in the tropics might not be moral in at the North Pole, and vice versa, right? I mean, we need to consider context in all of these things, but there is a reality to the effects. And so we discover rules. We discover approximate rules. We call them rules, but we have these little guidelines. We pass them back and forth. Do this, don't do that. And those are approximations of the right behavior. And you have to apply common sense to understand how to apply them. All right, that's where we go. The QR code leads you to all this stuff written down, available on the web if you're interested. So grab it now while you can, or if you really like typing URLs, it's down here. Questions?
All right, so let's take it one step further.
Oh, got a microphone.
This is Judy Bannister. Can you hear me on the internet over there? Can you hear me on Zoom?
Yes, yes.
Yes, no?
Yep, they can hear you.
Okay, fine. All right. Brilliant talk. Fabulous. I've been thinking about these ideas like forever, and you just took it one step further. Thank you very much. And I want to take it yet one step further.
Okay.
I think this follows directly from your talk. And that is that what's it called, your term, the moral optimum.
Oh.
The moral optimum worldwide is approaching a better level of moral optimum ever faster over time, and has been for centuries. We can prove it. I can go into detail, like, for example, Steven Pinker and, like in reality, it may not look like it, but in reality, globally,
we are getting along better and better.
Yes. Getting along better and better. Globally, humanity is improving very rapidly, yep. Has been doing so for centuries. We are moving away from war, from more violence to less violence, even though it doesn't look like it, but that's the objective data. That's what it shows us, okay? Right.
So we're learning, what we're learning is the optimum is there. We're learning to get closer and closer to that
how
optimum.
To get to that optimum.
Yep.
The whole world is trying to get to that optimum. A couple of other examples. Women's rights, moving faster and faster and faster globally over the decades and centuries, and now years, every
yep.
year, better than before. Gay rights, whatever. Oh, anyway, I don't want to say any more right now, but the point is,
yeah, that's good.
It's moving faster and faster. Why? Faster communication, internet, satellites, faster transport, TV right there when action happens. We can see when people are being slaughtered in Gaza. We can see it instantly. We know immediately. And so therefore we have immediate moral improvement.
Yeah, thank you. That's
worldwide.
That's a great point. Really good point. We haven't ended in our search for the correct moral behavior.
Oh, I want to repeat what I said at the beginning. That is, try to keep your statements short, precise, and avoid cross talking because other people want to talk. I see a hand over here. What's your name?
Kaushik. In reference to the boat analogy, I guess in that situation, it's very clear what the game is. It's just to move as fast as possible. But who decides what the right game to play is? Like, and also, I guess one thing too that maybe I've been feeling is that immorality works best when done in a society where everyone else acts fairly. Like, if everyone else is like trying to be faithful, if one person cheats, like they're more likely to get the maximum benefit from it.
Right. If you're the cheater and everybody else is following the rules, but you're sitting there siphoning stuff off the back, you can get a short-term benefit from that.
Yeah. But I guess, like, if the purpose of acting morally is to survive for as long as possible, but it does benefit to somehow be the odd one out in some situations.
Yeah. So there's a good example of that, and that is the leader. Okay. Generally, all human societies have a leader. Okay, a tribe leader or chief or whatever it is. That's not fair. It's not fair that one guy gets to be the leader and everybody else can't be leaders. but however, that's probably very moral. It's probably very moral to pick a leader because a tribe will survive better if you have a leader to follow. And we have a natural tendency to follow leaders. So the important point here is that moral behavior may not be equal across everybody. And there's no guarantee that the same rules are going to apply to everybody. The leader has special rules. He gets to do things differently than everyone else. Okay. But morality still, it all comes back to surviving as a group. And there are cheaters. And what you'll find is that if the society allows cheaters to persist, that society, if they allow that, that society will not do as well as one that actually responds and calls those people out and catches them, right? So again, a leader is not immoral, okay, but a cheater who cheats on their taxes or steals stuff, in the end will be caught, and it's moral to catch him. Make sense?
Okay, I see a few hands up. Let me take Werner first, then a couple people online.
All right, I'd like to suggest that your drive to survive may have changed now because we're in the Anthropocene, and we no longer need to survive in the same way that we did
Yes.
when we were evolving.
Yeah, that
Just
moral
like
optimum changes over
sugar.
time. It's not guaranteed to be the same. As technology comes along, it may shift what the right thing
The
to do.
drive to survive is no longer nearly as strong as it was because we can survive. We can control our environment much better. And so we have a different drive now for moral behavior.
Yes, and I
It's like
still see that as
Sugar
competition.
used to be good, maximizing your sugar intake used to be good, and now it's bad.
Yes, that's a good point. It used to be eat as much as you can while you had it, and now that's a problem. If you do that, we have to adopt a different behavior.
Michael, online.
Oh, online,
Hi, can you hear me?
Michael. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So, Keith, thank you very much for choosing this topic and for your presentation, because I believe it's very important and relevant to humanism.
Yes.
And once you are focusing on one tribe, whatever it is, on specific tribe, then all your argumentation makes sense. But the reality is that we live in the world where there are many tribes
Yes.
with very complex relationships, with competing interests. And I think that maybe you dismissed this moral relativism too quickly because there is more in this. And this is not that each tribe has its own morality necessarily. The tribes can have almost exactly the same morality, but focused around the needs of this tribe and dismissing the needs of other tribes.
Yes.
And it could be okay in the past, but maybe not any longer. So what about this?
Yeah, that's a really important thing. So in order to talk about this, I simplified it to talking about what benefits your tribe. But there is a multi-tribe effect, okay? The whole world. If these tribes are always at war, that's not going to be the benefit of them. I mean, there is something to say that if all these tribes can find a way to be at peace, they all thrive better. I mean, stealing from your neighbor is good in the short term, but it's not really good in the long term. It's better to work out some sort of arrangement. So I think the same thing applies there. And I think the same thing applies, Michael, because I know you're interested in this, in a complete ecosystem. If you look at the way ecosystems run, there's these rules that are in play in their behaviors that different animals have. And again, those are adopted to make the whole ecosystem thrive. That doesn't mean that any one of them, okay, remember, this is not selfish. Your morals may lead you to sign up and join the military and go to war for your country. And that may not be personally good for you, but that behavior could still be a very moral behavior because overall it makes everybody safer. See how this works? So you have to be careful about applying morals to yourself because it is a group thing. And then I think similarly, it applies across multiple tribes. If the multiple tribes can get along, they'll all thrive better than if they're constantly at war. But it is a slightly different level effect. I do think it applies though. Finish.
Zem?
Zemlaski. But you are
That
muted.
will be me. Thank you for your talk. I was hoping you would have a few slides on morality because you have none up there.
Okay, explain to us all what morality is.
Yes, morality is about values. It's about conscience. And as we grow, we develop what's called a moral compass. We develop a sense of what's right and what's wrong. And we all do it individually. This pertains to what we do ourselves, and also pertains to what others do. You've early on said that you're going to treat morality and ethics interchangeably. They are completely different. Ethics is the meaning we are in right now. We voluntarily agreed to follow certain norms because it is to our mutual benefit. And you did mention transactionalism at some point, to your credit. And, our meeting today, all of us who are logged in right now, this does not violate our normal norms, moral norms. If it did, we would log off. And there are some people maybe for whom this meeting is immoral, and they're not logged in because it violates that laws. And you also fail to distinguish between ethics and laws, which I find amazing. Laws are amoral. Driving on the right side of the road is not moral or immoral. It just is. Drive on the left and you'll be arrested, which again is amoral because there is no freedom of choice or freedom of conscience. So I find I'm sorry. I mean, unlike Judith, I find your thing rather compressed.
Okay. And so I'd urge you all to take a look around the internet and see the arguments that are put forward. And oftentimes they are very much like this. But I'd like to say that those guidelines are misguided because you're missing the forest for the trees. What we really are trying to do is to work together to get along. We do develop values, and those are in the personal code of conduct. Remember that level? Those are things that we personally decide, and we try to make those as good. We personally try to make laws that drive people to the right behavior. And I really can't say they're amoral. I mean, driving on the right or left doesn't really matter, but the act of trying to define how we should behave is very much in line with that. But you'll see that a lot of philosophers take a very different tact on morality. And you go read Kant, for instance, and his categorical imperative, where he says lying is lying. That's all it is. It doesn't matter the context. I think Kant was wrong on that. And I think a lot of debate is wrong. And I think it's greatly simplified to understand that morality is really at base just about us getting along.
Okay, your name?
This is Henry Ruddle, former book club member with Keith. That's how I know. So my question is, over history, there's been many societies that have succeeded for centuries by exploiting others, like with slavery and child brides and related things like honor killing and of course, exploitation of the poor and so on. And it's been very successful, and it has succeeded over many centuries. And so I would think that under your scheme, because those behaviors were successful at allowing the group to survive, that we would say slavery is moral because it was helpful to the group.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that with what we believe to be true about
so I'm glad
things like
you
that?
brought this up, and this is a really important thing. Remember that as Berna said, the moral optimum will change over time depending on your technology. Okay, and there's two possible explanations for slavery 2,000 years ago, and one is that was just as good as they could do. They just couldn't get to that moral optimum. They hit this point where they had slavery, but they hadn't really figured out that wasn't a good thing. And the fact that we've banished slavery today is evidence that we are getting better and that we are learning to get closer and closer to that moral optimum. The other explanation is that it's quite possible that the technology that the Romans had didn't allow them the kind of equality that we have today. They didn't allow them that in fact slavery was moral in that technology realm. I don't know, which of these explanations is better for it. But the fact that we moved forward and today, so something might have been moral back then that is no longer moral today. That's one thing. And the fact that we have moved to banish slavery shows that we are able to get closer and closer to a more moral behavior. Cultures today that have slavery don't do as well as the cultures that don't have slavery. So that shows that it is, at the end of the day, slavery is bad because those cultures don't do as well.
There's a couple hands up there. I can't read it from back
I see
here.
a Stuart at the first of the list.
Yeah, the first on the list. Stuart?
I'll have to unmute.
Yeah, hi. Thank you. I really appreciate your presentation and the organization of it and this conversation. And I think that my question, which I did put in the chat 5 minutes ago, which I will read, is somewhat related to our last question. Basically, I'm asking if you're familiar with the Star Trek Prime Directive, which is one of cultural non-interference. With regard to this, seems like cultures are making a judgment. So, for example, us here in the U.S., we have a very strong opinion that female genital mutilation and child marriage are wrong. They should not be practiced. But these are normal, accepted practices in other cultures, other countries. So we Americans, we feel very strongly that it is our moral obligation to help these people to stop such bad, wrong practices. Could you comment on this conflict?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so the Prime Directive was moral relativism. This is the idea that we're going to visit this planet, and however they live, that's good for them. We're going to let them continue. We're not going to judge them. We're going to let them continue. But you're right, Stuart. I am putting forth an idea of moral objectivism that says that we visit a primitive culture, we could find them doing something that is objectively bad. And it is our, I think it is our moral imperative to help them understand better behaviors that's better for everyone overall. Now, it sounds a bit arrogant to come in and say our morals are better than your morals. I don't know, but I think there is some truth to that at the end. I think there are people that are operating under better morals, and it's a matter of training, teaching everybody.
Okay, Dana.
Dana.
Oh, yes. Well, it occurred to me that you said we had progressed to the place we are now where everyone was equal. And a question popped up in my mind. Isn't it true that there's like the 99% and the 1%, and that people at the top of our cultural ladder who are accumulating the most shiny stones, money, it just seems like it's not really working out very well for the 99%.
Right.
So I'm not sure what you mean by people are now equal.
So I didn't mean to say that at all. There's nothing in my presentation about people being equal. Okay. What I said is that, well, and I would like it to be equal. I mean, there's a real feeling in here. I'd like to say, we're all, but unfortunately, it's about survival, and survival does not mean that we're all equal. And as much as I dislike that, there is, and we have seen for the last 1,000 years, the cultures in Europe tended to create a royalty and then the masses, right? There always was this upper class and lower class. And that worked. I mean, those cultures survived, okay? Eventually, the French threw their monarchy out, but, we still have in America, we have the 1% and the 99%, as you pointed out. Is that good or not? I don't know. Just because 99% of the people don't like it doesn't mean it's not good. What matters is that the culture survives and that everyone thrives and that there's well-being for most people. Now, my guess is that a more equitable distribution is going to be better for culture. That's my guess. But the truth is in who actually survives. Do you have one, Tom, or
Um,
we have
yeah.
another one back there?
Let me give you the
To
microphone.
the internet.
I think it's important to have a lot of humility in the way we approach this, because in the long run, we really don't know what the best outcome is going to be. And what religions tend to do is simplify it. All of us actually
Yep,
tend to
just follow these rules.
simplify
That's it.
the outcomes. And when you get right down to it, every action based on what you're saying, which I agree with entirely, has a moral basis to it. But we have to just be sure that we're really humble in the way we look at this, because we just don't know really which society, number one, is going to survive. And we don't know what criteria to use in determining optimal survival for the society. And that's the hard part.
Yeah, that's
And
the hard part.
difficulty is also the individual versus the collective. And right now we have one group in our nation and throughout the world that is more populist. They're more concerned with the rights of the individual, the survival, the freedom of the individual. And we have another group that looks more on an international collective basis. And these two are fighting each other.
They are. They are. So you remember that Mitch's book, Darwin's Apple, he talks about how religion reduced the cognitive load. I mean, if you're just facing the situation, you're thinking, I got these couple choices. What's the effect of that? What's, how do I figure all this stuff out? It can be very stressful. And religion does help simplify that. It simply says, do this, do that. And as long as you do that, that's sort of simplifies your world. So there is a role that's coming in to help you not have to work out all of the details of what's going forward. And we can't imagine that moral optimum. We can't hold that in our heads. I mean, it's just like way too complex. We can't do that. We have to have a simpler world. And so we ultimately do simplify our world. But we're trying to make it as close to the optimum as possible. So that is indeed what's going on.
Michael?
I agree with your point about survival as the main selection criteria for morality, but this makes me thinking how long a tribe has to survive in order to prove that the morality of this tribe works for it. For centuries, for millennia.
Yeah, ultimately, it's going to have to be generations. It's going to have to be many generations. Yeah.
And this primary directive example, it also highlights the inherent tension in our modern moral beliefs, because from this tribal survival standpoint, if a tribe survived maybe for centuries doing something that we find objectionable, we should think that that's okay. But our civilization, our Western civilization, I would say, it's based on the idea of individual human rights. And if what they do violate our idea of human life, human rights, should we interfere?
Yes.
Or at least should we be careful about this and not to do more harm than good if we try to change their culture? So
remember that our understanding of human rights and the universal list of human rights, that falls in that second level. That's in the ethics and norms and cultural agreements level. And we believe that's a good approximation to the ultimate good, but we don't know until we try it out. And unfortunately, so we could be wrong. I mean, some of those human rights declarations could be wrong. Probably not, but we don't know until we actually see it work, and that would take many generations to know. So it's all a big experiment.
Yeah, Jerry. Is it on? Oh,
there's a light on.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment. I want to apologize for me running around. I have a lot of the stuff that we usually would use in my car, and my car got unlocked, and I had to have my wife bring me the key. So we're going to do a little bit of gyrating this morning. It's a little bit different than it normally would be. Just please bear with us.
Okay. Jerry.
Well, I'm not sure how you feel about it, but it seems to me as though most people in this world feel that things are gradually getting better over time. I'm concerned about resources. I mean, basically, I would say that almost nobody was concerned about limits to resources until like about 50 years ago or so.
Yeah.
And there are a few people now, but it still seems like it's not much. I mean, we're way beyond consumption in a number of areas.
Yes.
And this seems to be a major problem
Yes.
threatening us in the next 50, 100 years.
So it certainly is. Limits to growth. How many people can we have on the planet? But what I'd like to sort of a weak point of what I'm presenting. I don't think it's a flaw, but this says nothing about limiting population. This is all about growth, right? And I'm one of those people that I'd like to see the population of the Earth stabilize at some level that we can sustain, right? I mean, that's what I would see as a personal goal. But morality doesn't drive you there. Morality simply is going to drive you to overpopulate the world, I believe. Because when we get to the point where people are starving, then we don't have the well-being that we need. So there is a limit. Okay, it doesn't go forever, right? But again, it really at the end, morality is going to favor those cultures that tend to populate more. I wish it wasn't.
Hi, yeah, I had another little question, which is, it sounds like that you're saying the whole purpose and objective of a civilization is to merely survive,
Yes.
And what if the
thrive.
civilization that survives is a bad thing? That it destroys the earth,
Yeah.
that it kills a lot of people,
Yeah.
that it's very unsafe, it's exploitative and colonial
Maybe
and single-minded,
from the
and is a system that is utterly corrupt.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working really well here, though. And so that my question is the survival of this civilization actually such a good thing for the planet?
Yeah. So if people ask that question, maybe it would be better to wipe all the humans off the face of the earth. Maybe that would be better, in something.
I have to say, if you're thinking of wiping me off the earth, I can't see that as a good thing at all.
No, nobody's going to see that. Nobody's going to see that as a good thing, but that argument gets made a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, what I'm focusing on is this interaction between survival and the behaviors that you adopt. And if you have lots of cultures, the ones that adopt behaviors that allow them to outcompete the others, I'm saying that that's the definition of good, that is good, even if we don't like it. And if it came that the best way to survive was for everybody to have a supreme leader, I mean, I would hate that, right? I mean, but if that's what allows everybody to thrive, then that's what the definition of good is. And I'm tying them together, and I realize that it's controversial, so I hope you follow with me on here. But
Okay, I got several hands up. Let me give Zem, and I've forgotten your name, and
Yeah,
okay,
I just like
Zem,
to give a tip of my hat to Jerry, who spoke, who was, I think, the first moral argument we heard today. He had a system of values about the environment, its importance, the importance of human survival. And I say that because Jerry and I always squabble over this. I have a different set of moral values about that, slightly, but I definitely respect Jerry's. But I wanted to go back about the survivability of tribes. It seems historically a very efficient way to ensure it is to murder members of another tribe and take their resources. So my question is, Holocaust, thumbs up, thumbs down.
So And usually I get that. Thank you very much for that question. Usually come to it. What about the Nazis? They thought they were doing great. They thrived
Exactly.
very well, but
Exactly.
they did so for less than 10 years. I mean, there was a limit to that. They're no longer here. And I think that's how we can say that their system of behavior is immoral because they did not last. Now, it was hard to get rid of them. I get it. But that, and we can say the same thing about communism. Okay. Communism was brought in, big experiment, beginning of the 1900s. It doesn't exist today. I wouldn't really call China communist anymore, but for the most part, the communist systems fell because it wasn't the right system. It wasn't good. And so Nazis down.
I do think that the reason for why the Nazis are no longer here is a bit of a stretch because it's very possible to see a world in which they could have won, and like we were really the last thing between us and maybe seeing the Nazis prosper, quote unquote, for another God knows how long. But had they been the only society to keep flourishing, like they wouldn't have any opposing society to try to take them down. But I guess maybe one thing I'm wondering is I guess you make this distinction between the survival of the individual and the survival of the culture. And I think it goes in two ways. Like one, like people being selfish at the expense of others.
Yes.
But I also think that, for example, in the example that you posed, where people just kill people randomly, like in a society where resources are limited, like I think he was saying, what if we decided to kill people that were like that fell below a certain threshold? Not arbitrarily, but very systematically. Like I don't think you would agree that this was necessarily moral in that everyone deserves an equal chance to live somewhat. Not even that it's like that today, but it's just a lot more complicated, I think.
Yeah, it is. It is complicated. At the end of the day, and I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but if it works, it works. Again, you're right. I mean, the whole conflict around World War II, we all feel very lucky that the Allies were able to win that conflict. If the Nazis had taken over the whole world, I still think the system would have fallen apart eventually. I mean, I just have some sort of faith in that. In that, at the end of the day, the culture that thrives is the one that has the most well-being for all the people in that culture. And so that back and forth will get us there eventually. It might have taken a few more generations to get there. We're all just guessing at this point. We don't really know. But I think at the end of the day, and I love the reference that Judy made to Steven Pinker, that we are living in a better time. And we shouldn't be surprised about that because that's the way we work. We are constantly improving, and if you see morality as survival, that's how we are improving morality over time, and that's where it comes from. And most importantly, we don't need a supernatural being to command them. I mean, these things will come about naturally, and we will figure them out because that's how learning systems work.
Yeah. Is it on? Yeah, it was just because the question of overpopulation came on, and it made me think that I believe that in recent decades, I would say, we have incorporated new aspects into morality, like environmental protection, which was not a value, let's say, even 100 years ago. Or if you think of medieval Europe, like the tradespeople who did like whatever tanning hides, all the effluent, all the filthy water it just ran into the rivers, and it was not a moral concern. Today we think of environmental protection or pollution as moral concerns, I think. So it would seem to me that we are able to expand the framework of what factors are included in questions of morality.
I agree, and I think that those elimination of those kinds of pollution have in fact increased the well-being of the population in general. And so, no, I think you're exactly right. I've no disagreement at all.
Michael?
This survival criteria is correct in the sense that if your tribe died, then your morality also died
Yes.
with it, right? But
Yeah.
the reality is that we have many tribes, and some people belong to more than one tribe. For instance, we are getting, we and other countries getting many people, immigrants from other countries that failed, that may be in the state of civil war or something like this. So they did not survive. And so what should guide the moral compass of these people who belong to these multiple cultures? I myself is from Russia. I do not wish Putin's Russia to survive. Sorry. I wish Ukraine to survive. I wish the United States to survive, but not Putin's Russia.
Yes.
And so,
okay, all right. But to answer your question, yes, we all exist in multiple overlapping tribes. There's the United States. There are other, international organizations you may be part of. A lot of people see their church as their tribe, which is international. There's communities, there's schools. These are all overlapping. And so there's no clear experiment going on. I mean, I'd love to take two tribes exactly equal and run experiments on it. Wouldn't that be great? We can't do that. The experiment is a big mess with all sorts of things going on. However, the same sort of thing happens in an ecosystem. Ecosystem, you have hundreds of animals and plants all interacting. There's this big complex thing, but they do tend to evolve to become more organized, more complex over time. I mean, ecosystems just tend to, and all of the different parts of the ecosystem tend to adapt to their special niche to it. So, I mean, I guess, Michael, you just have to close your eyes and just try not to think about it too hard. And see that there is a trend that brings us in this direction. And yeah, I don't know, that this effect builds up over time. That's where I am on that.
Keith, one more question. I'm trying to get my head around. You say that morals are changing with time. There's objective morals, but they change with time.
Correct.
And they change with.
Is not necessarily static. It can change over time.
And it changes with environment and location.
Yes.
So there's all these moral optimums.
Yes.
Isn't that the same as moral relativism?
No.
Okay,
because
how's the difference?
Optimum is defined by the reality around us. It's defined like the boats. It's defined by the water and the air and the sea, and not by any person's opinions. Our opinions may get closer and closer to that, right? But that's not what actually defines morality.
Yeah, I think the thing is, if morality is an attempt to lead better lives and survive, there's no guarantee that it's going to work.
But it's
all we've got.
That's what we have, and it works. It works.
Michael, I'm sorry, was a hand over
Go
here?
here.
Sorry, Jerry.
Somebody's got their head anyway. Somebody else.
I think Michael had his hand up.
No.
Okay.
Nope, no hands
Sorry.
up.
I can't see.
Yeah,
I can't see light-colored hands against your wall. Jerry.
Well, it sounds in general that in this room there is a faith that things are getting better and better and better. I question that.
And we appreciate your voice. Keep it
Yeah.
honest.
I think the thing about rules is we talk about the government and the Supreme Court are really trying to make the world a better place, and we don't all think they're doing a great job about it.
Oh, it's really hard to say what actions government takes that actually improves things.
Yeah. Zem?
Them.
Yeah, very quickly about Steven Pinker, I guess the better sides of our nature, and he shows violence decreasing gradually, even though not evenly over time. The reason for it is increased lethality of our weapon system. Violence is decreasing over time because the cost of engaging in it has grown so much. If I have a nuclear weapon, you will think twice and thrice, of killing my tribe, for instance, and taking my stuff. I mean, you might succeed, but not before I wipe out, half of your population. So no, we're not getting better. I don't know if I agree with Jerry that we're getting worse, but it's simply we've changed the calculus on the ground. We've made violence very expensive. And that's the better. I guess it's, shows that we're ingenious as a species, that we're able to do this. But I don't see any inherent goodness in that. Just a statement.
Yeah, I am concerned that globally we may be headed towards a new war, all-out war. It'll be fought with drones. We don't know what the right behavior with drones are. There's going to be a lot of experiments, and some of those are going to be pretty horrible until we figure out how to handle the right behavior of using drones.
Yeah, I think most of us choose our morality from the people around us.
Yeah.
What they say is right is what we agree is right. And what you described as the mechanism that forces that doesn't work on us too well as individuals, because we're going to die anyway.
I like driving faster than the speed limit.
I'll make a citizen's arrest. Jerry.
Yeah, I want to respond to Michael's comments about doesn't want Russia to survive, but does want Ukraine to survive and the USA to survive. Putin's Russia, yeah. Well, I would agree with that part about the United States until maybe 10 years ago or so. But now, I mean, if the Trump administration managed to get authoritarianism and somehow we end up in a war with Western Europe, I would rather Western Europe won.
Excuse me, Michael?
Well, the problem is that people, it's not obvious to me that people are getting better. And it's equally not obvious that they are getting worse. The problem is that I don't see an objective way to decide. Is it better or worse? Or moreover, I believe that many people whose actions caused horrible consequences, they were convinced that they were trying to improve people's lives.
Yes.
And moreover, it was the main drive, maybe, because they wanted to make everyone happy, like it applies to communists, for instance, and to religious fanatics and so on. But this disconnect between motivation and the real consequences, this makes me think twice before I decide to act based on my maybe best intentions, because how do we know? How can we judge what really will be the impact of our actions? And that's, I don't know. Is it related to morality, or is it rather the practical issue, but the practical issue of such a magnitude that makes very difficult to reason about morality without considering this real world consequences.
Yeah, no, that is correct. I'm saying that a moral optimum exists, and that it is objective, and that it exists everywhere. I mean, it doesn't exist, right? But it's real. And but we don't know what it is, and the only way we can do that is by experimenting and trying and guessing. And we need to use our logic to try to figure out what might be the best thing. But at the end of the day, it's whether the morals work. If they work, they're moral. If they don't work, they're not.
Okay, I'm going to let Dana have the last question or comment.
Yeah, gosh, I forgot what I was going to say. No, actually, I did.
You can ask me later. We'll discuss later.
Okay.
Question over here. Last question.
Okay, you get the last question then. And give your name.
Hello, my name is Tim. I feel like a common objection to an objective system of morality is that we can describe the reality around us in sort of very hard scientific terms, and that makes everything sort of that this is the only way of doing it, and that going at a higher level like psychology, sociology, humanities, that these are more subjective in a sort of in their epistemology. They're more subjective, and that's the most common like chat objection to it. I've heard counters like Richard Carter calls it the modal fallacy. I'm curious if you have a pat answer. Your whole talk here was really a big picture answer. Do you have like a pat answer for that kind of objection?
Ask you one more time, because I got the gist of that.
Right.
But you're saying that
the sort of questions we have about right and wrong relate on the level of like the soft sciences, like sociology, psychology, the humanities, history, where there's more disagreement.
Yeah.
And that we're looking at this in an objective sense, the hard sciences, physics, math, chemistry, and that the fact that at one level of description, these things are very hard and fast and objective means that trying to do these squishy items of human well-being, flourishing, that there's going to be inherent that there's just no way of addressing that.
Yeah. Okay. So hard sciences have sort of very clearly measurable things, whereas when we get into sociology and psychology, they are squishy in that we don't have any clear way to measure precisely what we're doing and precisely what the outcome is. And it's a reasonable question to ask. I still think that, we hit upon these group-oriented behaviors, and we hit upon them by trial and error. We just learn that certain laws, certain behaviors to encourage help us all to get along. I don't think the fact that they're squishy changes anything. I don't think it fundamentally means that there is no correct way to behave in a situation. It does get to be complex because the correct, we talk about the driving on the left and the right. The correct way to behave may depend on all sorts of things that happened in the past. So you have to sort of take that into account. But I don't know what else to add other than I think that the ultimate thing is that we see morality as behaviors that are good or bad, right or wrong. Those behaviors are somewhat in our genes, somewhat in our instincts. They're somewhat in our learned, and they're somewhat in the logic that we use to sort of imagine what might happen. And we bring all those together. And in the end of the day, if an action is good, it's because it increased the well-being of our tribe.